Hey everybody, Germany's Coast Yard here, and in this episode of Germanator Studios, we are going to be finishing our dinosaur themed area of the park. And to get started with that, I decided to build another restaurant. And this one, I don't have a theme. Well, not that I don't have a theme, but I have not picked out what kind of restaurant I want it to be. So as of right now, the stalls are basically empty. Um, So if you want to leave it in the comments what kind of restaurant I should make it, I would appreciate it very much. Um, but the design process was very similar to the restaurant we did at the front of the park, where I left one tile of empty space between the restaurant and the park itself. And I also did the booth technique where we raise one tile of terrain to place benches back to back and then lower the tiles down, which you can see me doing here. And obviously there's still no table in between. I don't know of any way to make something that would look like a table. Um, However, I think in general, especially when looking through the windows that I'm placing here, or just in general, it creates a nice illusion of having a booth, and that's why I've chosen to go with it again. And you can see I sort of laid out the foundation of the restaurant, but as you'll see soon enough, I decided that the kitchen space of the restaurant does not need to be the size of the dining room space. Um, it certainly does not it need to extend way out in one direction when it can just go right behind the restaurant. So I will adjust that eventually. But here you can see me doing ah, can't talk. I'm finishing off the interior walls, and I wanted to have sort of an accent wall along the backside that was different from the plaster walls we used on the front. So I went with the wattle walls as the back wall, and I think that just made it was a nice little design choice. And here you can see me continuing the plaster walls on the outside as part of the facade, and then going with just the plain go away green colored walls along the back. And along this point is where you'll see I end up cutting the length of the restaurant, or the kitchen, I should say, short. Just sort of mostly it my the size I make the kitchen is more or less an estimate, just based on kitchens I've seen um, at Cedar Point and just in general, various kitchens I've been in. Um, a kitchen does not need to be huge because you can fit quite a bit in a low amount of space. Um, but that's besides the point. What matters is that in the context of this build, the kitchen fits on the footprint nicely, and it does not make the footprint bigger than it needs to be. And again, it's very similar to the last restaurant we designed. And there you can see I put a cooler and a freezer on the outside. And notice I didn't use the office roof edge pieces until the building itself. So the coolers slash freezer would function as a separate unit that is sort of attached essentially to the building, but it's its own device in its own unit. So I didn't put the edge on it because it really doesn't have a conventional roof. It just has a top. Um, all it is basically an insulative container with a refrigeration device. And that's what I did on top with the air conditioning unit. I don't know how realistic that aspect of it is, but it gets the message across as to what that is supposed to be. And that's really what I wanted. And here you can see me changing the dirt texture to the cracked mud texture. This is a subtle change, but I decided it would work better for the theme of the prehistoric area. And like I said, it's a subtle change, but I think it's really the subtle things, the subtle changes and differences that can make a project. It's the nuance that I think makes things work well in the end. So I decided to make that change. And there you can just see me putting the pathways, attaching them to the restaurant, and then putting in some low adventure hedgerows along the side just to finish things off. Obviously, that doesn't account for the rest of the foliage that needs to be done. Um, and here I'm just adding a top, like a cap, I guess, to the roof so it doesn't just appear to end and be flat at the top from the guest's perspective. And I think that rounds out the build nicely, and it makes it look a little different from the gift shop we built a few episodes ago. It makes it feel like its own building and not just a copy and paste. And I think in some respect that can also help differentiate it. And here I'm just putting in some more foliage and putting in a back fence to the area. It took me a little bit of time to design this with a way that I was happy with, but ultimately, because I wanted to do like a diagonal at first, but with the animatronics and just the way I wanted it to line up with the restaurant, it just didn't quite work. But the way I ended up doing it, as you see it here, I think it looks nice. And again, like a fence, people don't go to amusement parks or theme parks to look at the fences, so the fence just needs to get the job done and look good doing it, but it doesn't need to do any more or any less than that um, on an aesthetic level. So here, I decided to put in a small drop tower. I had that extra 3x3 space. I was going to put a building there, but I didn't know what function I wanted it to serve, and I thought, well, I remembered that the launched free fall ride was 3x3, so I thought, well, that'll fit in nicely there. And we can do just a really small one, something that would really be more of a family ride. And I settled on some colors that I thought fit the prehistoric theme. And with the flames along the base, I think aesthetically I wanted it to be like a volcanic type theme. But the name we settle on is Pterodon or Pterodon Plunge. I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce the P in Pterodon or not. I don't think I ever have, so I'm not going to now. Anyway, and just to do something cool with the border, I decided to build up a little wall there. And initially I was going to put in these little windows, but I decided it blocked off the view of the ride more than I wanted it to. And I settled on the safari fence pieces. I thought those looked a lot nicer. Um, it established a clear boundary between the ride and the pathway, and something that can't really be breached on accident. And that's sort of the purpose I needed it to serve. So I think it did a nice job at that. And it makes the ride continue to feel open. And now, okay, I was experimenting. I wanted to put the Pterodon animatronic in there. And originally I was going to see if I could put it in the ride area somewhere, but I just settled on next to the entrance slash queue in that extra patch of land we had. And I should have done that from the start because retrospectively that was the obvious choice. But you learn as you experiment with things, and sometimes trying things that you aren't sure about can prove you can prove to yourself that like you can discover that something that doesn't seem good in theory actually works well in practice. So um, not that I need to justify trying to build an animatronic in the ride area. Um, Anyhow, here we are working on a gateway between the um, prehistoric area and the next area, which will be a medieval themed area. So on one side, I'm doing a castle structure, and on the other side, you see me continuing our bamboo wall set theme. And here I'm putting in some windows just to add some texture, just to avoid having a completely flat wall, and putting in some cannon pieces as well, just to break up the monotony of the structure and to make it look nice and to make it look like it has a theme park budget, because we're in sandbox mode and it really has no budget. So that's what's nice about Rollercoaster Tycoon. And here I'm just putting in some odds and ends that need to be on the path and lighting up the structure. Nothing too crazy. And that's about all we'll do on the medieval side of the build. That side will be a project for a future video, but this is about completing the Dino Land. Um, and yeah, the rest of this footage I think is just finishing up some various odds and ends, mainly with the pathway systems. Um, I'll put in benches and trash cans. Initially, I had started putting wooden benches around, but I decided to switch the ones I had placed to the tribal bench just because it fits the aesthetic of the area better. But it doesn't feel like I don't like the prehistoric benches because they're bone shaped, and I can only think that would be kind of uncomfortable to sit on, and they just look uncomfortable, and they look cartoonish in the context of something that's not meant to look cartoonish. It's meant to feel more authentic. So that's why I didn't use those ones, and I thought the tribal benches worked well, and they also fit with just the architectural scenery as well. So you can see me putting those in around the place. And I'm just using my general method of placing benches around the planters. Um, that 1x3 planter design, I mean, it's something I've used in most of my builds, and it's something I will probably continue to use on pathways that are 3 wide. And I like to place the benches and the lights around those in a consistent pattern. So I will place them on the long edge. I place the lights in the middle, and then in the remaining 4 tiles I place benches, and then on every other uh, planter I will add a trash can on one of the short edges, um, just so that way we have trash cans pretty consistently. Speaking of trash cans, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in a previous episode, but at some point in time, Disney had conducted a study um, with their park goers and found that people would carry trash for no more than like 20 or 30 feet before dropping it and just littering. So they place trash cans basically every 20 to 30 feet or so in the parks. Um, so it helps on the guest level to lower littering in a non-obvious way. The point being, I try to place trash cans in my parks, maybe not every 20 feet, because that would add up to like every 2 tiles, but I place them liberally. And here, this footage is, I actually filmed this footage before I filmed anything else you saw, um, but I wanted to try something a little different to see if having new tasks on the screen would be more engaging. So if you're still here, thanks. You made my plan work, I guess. Anyhow, so here we're doing a little bit more tweaking on our dinosaur ride, and as far as I know, I don't think there's anything else that needs done with this project after what we do here. Um, Aside from a few odds and ends, the primary thing you'll see me do is go through and paint the walls in each of the scenes to have more of a sky slash terrain color background. Um, I won't give too much away with that, I suppose. Um, but right here, I'm just fixing the little time warp transition scene just to make it look more even, I guess. And I couldn't settle on a color for those little 2/3 height walls, but I went with red because I thought it fit a little better than having a black edge. The red edge feels a little softer. And along here in the Ice Age room, I put blue walls. And one thing I guess I do need to do is I didn't extend the blue walls all the way up in the little mammoth scene. I did delete those 2 walls there, which I think worked nicely in the end. Um, but I put light blue for the sky, and left the bottom ones as white, just to be like a Terranian background. And all of the base level colors will, except for I think one scene, they will be more Terranian in color. And then I went for most of the scenes with, I was pretty consistent in going in the order of brown, dark orange, light orange, and then the like salmon pink color. And then in the next room with the ocean, um, I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted this scene to be, and eventually, because I didn't want to have to add in extra pieces, but I decided, well, for consistency's sake, I will delete those 2 full height walls and put in the 1/3 height block wall, and then the 2/3 height light blue wall, just to make it line up with everything else in that room. So nothing too crazy there. The underwater room was already painted, and in this one with the pterodon, I believe. Oh no, this isn't the pterodon. I'm not going to spoil anything yet then. But here we're just going with that orange color again, pretty straightforward. And continuing that into the room with the pterodon, but I decided because this is a flying creature, I wanted to have more of a sky color. And I settled on this lavender color for the upper thing, and then the light blue for the lower wall. And I did that because I wanted it to feel really elevated. And when you're really elevated, like in the earthly atmosphere, obviously it starts to fade into like a indigo color, I suppose, as you get to higher elevations. Not that the pterodons are flying that high, but I wanted this room to feel like you're elevated. And you'll see that also helps it transition nicely into the next room, which is 4 high. So you basically start at the level of the sky, of the light orange in the sky, and you work your way downwards, back towards the ground level, essentially. So in that regard, um, I thought it was, I thought it made sense to have like all sky colors in the previous room, and then going into this room, it makes for a smoother transition, I would say. Not that going from cool colors to warm colors is a smooth transition, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. And I just did a little bit more work with the painting to make it seem like the not the iguanodon, I can't remember what this guy's called, but to make it seem like he's not floating in the sky, I did some more brown colors a little higher to make it seem like he might be on a hill or something. And we're just continuing the general color scheme along here. Nothing too crazy. And I didn't feel the need to try and do anything super crazy with the colors because ultimately these are just here to make the background go away. But the primary focus is on the dinosaurs and on the different show pieces, none of which are the walls. So these basically make it so, instead of feeling like you're in a room with black walls, it breaks things up and it creates a more immersive experience, which is what I wanted to do. And then, yeah, this is the final scene too I just painted, and I believe that's everything that needs done for this ride, aside from a couple more odds and ends. Okay, so stepping away from the painting of the walls, I wanted to fix the little head chopper in there, where the wall goes too low, and I decided to continue using this Chicago wall small piece, because it doesn't extend as low. Basically, the entire set of those two pieces is only 2/3 height, so there's enough clearance for people's foreheads who are riding, and it continues the aesthetic because we use those pieces elsewhere on the little warp tunnel. So I put that on both tunnels, and I thought that worked pretty nicely. And along here, I'm just putting in a doorway that I accidentally covered up in the last episode, just so that way guests who need to exit and emerge as can. And that's everything I have for this episode, so enjoy an updated POV. This will probably be the last POV I post, because the only change I need to make is behind the mammoth. I just need to extend the sky blue upward, as you'll see in a moment. But other than that, that's everything I have for this episode. So enjoy the rest of the POV and have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Until next time, I'll see you later. Goodbye.